What do you get when you combine simplified practice marketing, proven ROI strategy, and Van skate shoes? You get Mark Thackeray, of course. So lace up, grab your green smoothie, and get ready, because this is Dental Marketing Secrets. And this is Mark.
All right, you guys, in today's episode, I do something a little bit different. I'm interviewing Colin Carr, who founded a commercial real estate group, and he works with dentists all over the country to help them successfully negotiate their leases, to purchase new property for their practice, and ultimately save them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I know it's not necessarily marketing related, but the conversation was so good that I thought I wanted to share this with you, because I think you'll get a lot of value from it. If you've ever wondered, should I be purchasing a property for my practice, or should I lease? Which one is better? What do I need to know going into this negotiation? What are some things that I'm not thinking about? What do I not know going into this whole situation? Colin is a tremendous resource. He's built a very successful team of agents that works specifically within the healthcare industry. And so he understands the market. And so I asked him a bunch of different questions, and here's the result. You're going to want to listen in. Cool. All right, Colin. So here's the first question I got for you. So when you're talking about a, real estate acquisition versus a dental lease, like what is really on the line? What's at stake when you're looking at leasing versus purchasing, and if you're a dental practice owner, for example?
Well, anytime you're talking about a dentist, you've got either a space that you lease, as you mentioned, or you have a space that you own. And the difference between a properly negotiated transaction is minimally tens of thousands of dollars up to several $100,000 if it's poorly negotiated. So you can have that money work in your favor or against you, but you get into, let's say, an average size space, 3,000 square feet. And if you overpay by $2-3 a square foot, that's $6,000 to $9,000 per year in excess rent that you could have avoided if it was properly negotiated. Then you get into concepts such as free rent. People don't realize it all the time. It's very common to get free rent on any transaction you do, whether it's a brand new lease for a new office or even on a lease renewal. And so if you don't capture the free rent that you should have, or that a sophisticated tenant would capture, like if you're talking an office user, Lockheed Martin, Charles Schwab, large office users, they're going to get the free rent. If you're talking retailers, Chipotle, Starbucks, they're going to get the free rent. Right. So if you don't get the free rent, you can leave another 10, 15, 20 grand on the table very quickly, or you can win that in your favor. You get into concepts like a tenant improvement allowance. It's very common for landlords to contribute a significant amount of money to either build out a space and even to renovate a space. Even on a lease renewal, it's incredibly common to have landlords cut a very sizable check to refresh the space. And people say, well, yeah, I know they do that on new leases, but do they do that on renewals as well? The answer is absolutely. Because the reality is, if you move out of that space, they're going to put a lot more money into that space to release it than they would on a renewal. Right. So you get a tenant improvement allowance where you might get a check for 40 grand, 80 grand, 120 grand. Again, depends on the size of the space, depends on how much work's needed. But you can add up to a lot of money very quickly. Tens of thousands of free rent, tens to well over 100,000 in tenant improvement allowance. And then you get that lease rate. If you overpay by even $2 a square foot, $6,000 a year times 10 years, you're up to $60,000. And so you start adding these numbers together, and then that's in addition to annual increases and other concepts that are available to negotiate. But you add all that money up and you can get to $100,000, $200,000 very quickly. And then as every doctor knows, when you bill $1, you don't keep $1. You bill $1, you might keep 18 cents, 24 cents, 30 cents. So you go out there and you make a $100,000 mistake. That might be $400,000 in production to pay the bill on that. Right. You make a $150,000 mistake and so on. So the long story short here is there's a lot on the line with any commercial real estate transaction, and you need to address every transaction with a specific strategy. You need to create posture, and you need to assume that the other side is going to try to take advantage of you and capture the best terms possible. And you need to go at it with a professional approach.
Yeah, right. And that's the challenge that most dentists have, right? I mean, they look at this, they're not trained formally on how to negotiate a lease, or they're not trained on how do I prepare this so I can maximize all these benefits like you described with the tenant improvement? Am I making sure, and do I have the right price per square foot and all these things? So, when you're talking with a dentist, what are some of those first steps for a dentist to look at these things, to start looking at real estate? What would you recommend that they do? I mean, you mentioned obviously finding someone that they trust, but how do they know who to trust?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. To start with, the reason that they don't always pay attention, to answer a question I think you alluded to, is they're just assuming that all the costs are relative. They're used to being called on by 5 or 6 merchandise reps that all sell similar products, and there's kind of a similar pricing structure. They just assume that it's fair. You go into one grocery store, and the price for this product costs similar to the other grocery store. Same thing. You go into Cabela's, you go into another, outdoor store, and prices are fairly similar. The problem is commercial real estate, the prices are all over the board, and a landlord's definition of a market deal is the most they can charge you. So it starts with understanding that there's a lot on the line, and it starts understanding that the other side is going to try to capitalize on the deal, and they're going to try to win and beat you in the negotiation. So that's step number one. Understand what's on the line and understand that there's a very serious high dollar negotiation about to take place.
Right.
The next thing is you do want to find someone to represent your interests. If a dentist or a doctor calls a landlord and starts trying to talk, high dollar negotiations or real estate, the landlord knows right away the doctor does not know what they're doing. It doesn't matter how educated you are, doesn't matter how many degrees you have or how many letters you have after your name. They know you're intelligent when it comes to your craft, your industry, your specialty. But they know for a fact that you're not a professional commercial real estate negotiator. And they know that you haven't taken dozens of hours of your time to learn the market. And they're going to assume that you don't deserve the same respect. That doesn't mean they're going to be disrespectful to you. It doesn't mean that they're going to tell you that, but they're going to assume that you don't know the difference between a really good deal and an average deal. And they're going to treat you inferior to the way they would treat Charles Schwab or again, Lockheed Martin or Merrill Lynch or a large office user or retailer.
Right.
The way that you find a good real estate agent is you ask the people that are in the industry, ask the people that you already trust, ask your CPA, ask your lender, ask the merchandise and equipment people that you trust in the market that you've worked with for a long time. Ask them, say, hey, who do you know that does healthcare real estate? Who do you know that specializes working for dentists or veterinarians or whatever industry the person is in?
Right.
And they'll be able to tell you, hey, I've heard this person's name or I've worked with this person and I trust them. And that'll start to give you the ability to compile a list of agents that you could reach out to. You can also try a Google search and you can get names that way as well. But once you get a name or 2 or 3, it's important then to actually interview that person and then ask them questions. How many healthcare deals do you work on per year? How much of your work is landlord focused versus tenant and buyer focused? Why is your company unique, or what does your company do that other companies don't do? And then you get comfortable with them. Same way that a patient would be comfortable with a doctor if they had a large procedure coming up. It's one thing to get, to come in and get your teeth cleaned. It's another thing to get, 5 implants done. That's a much different day, much different set of procedures, et cetera. And you just want to get comfortable with the person that you are thinking about working with.
Yeah, 100%. And it's challenging because some of these dentists, are so busy, they're so swamped with so many other things that it's hard for them to carve out time to do all the research on their own. Some of them would like to do that and would like to, learn about commercial real estate transactions, for example, and how to negotiate a proper lease. But the reality is they just don't have the time. And so I loved your suggestion about just, hey, go to those people that you already trust, get a recommendation from them. And then once you have those names, then follow up and take a few minutes to just ask them questions and get a better feel for them. That's a great advice.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can typically get a good feel for somebody in a few minutes. The way that they communicate, the things that are important to them, the way that they respond to your questions, you're going to be able to tell very quickly with most people that you talk to in the commercial real estate world, whether this person is going to work very diligently on your behalf and put your interests first, or whether they're just trying to get another transaction done. The reality is this: there's some really, really bad commercial real estate agents. There's a lot of really average commercial real estate agents, and then there's some good agents. Yeah. It's no different than a lot of industries. You're looking for a good attorney. Some great attorneys out there. There's some terrible attorneys, and there's a ton of people that are in between that are as average as it gets. You want to find the people that you really trust. They're going to work at the highest level and are going to operate with a spirit of excellence. Put your interests first. And if you find those people, those are the ones you want to lock into.
Yeah, 100%. And I just go back to what you were saying initially, just what is really at stake here? Is that really worth it to you to find someone that can help you find some free rent, that can help you and, get a better cost per square foot, that's going to translate to $100,000 for you. I mean, it's understanding really the whole context of what's going on and then finding someone that can really fill that need.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because again, you're not talking about, buying a box of bonding material where if you don't like it, you just throw it out and start over with another product. Or if you maybe overpay for it this time because you didn't realize you had low inventory, you pay it, maybe a premium to get it shipped to you faster, buy it. And then next month you buy it in bulk and get a better price. When it comes to real estate, you get one crack at it typically every 5, 7, or 10 years. If you're doing a lease, Right. If you're doing a purchase, you might get one crack in your entire career. So you can't get the do-over situation of, hey, let me get a better deal next time. You can, but it's going to take you 7 to 10 years to wait out that bad lease before you get another shot at getting a good lease.
Yeah, that's a great thing to remember. So you mentioned, okay, whether it's leasing or purchasing, what's better? Like, how do you know?
Leasing and purchasing both have some really great attributes and reasons of why you want to do them. It also depends on the time of your career. If you are in a place early on where you don't know if this is where you want to be located long-term, if you think you're going to need a lot more space in the future and you want to start with a smaller space, if you don't want to borrow as much money at the beginning, leasing can be a phenomenal opportunity. You have the ability to have more flexibility with a 7 or 10 year lease. You have the ability to expand into more space, maybe adjacent to you, or to relocate and buy a building in the future. Landlords pay a healthy amount of money in the form of a tenant improvement allowance and free rent to get long-term leases. And so they will put a lot of skin in the game to get you to lease from them and pay them for the next 7 or 10 years. Right. So there's a lot of reasons why leasing makes sense. The bottom line is you should always look at all your options though. Yeah. You should look at options to lease or purchase. Sometimes people go into the transaction and they say, well, I have to own or I have to lease. And that's great to have a preference, but you need to keep an open mind and you need to go and see all your options. Because there's certain times where the only option to purchase is going to be a dramatically inferior property where the location's not as good, the building's not as nice, the neighboring tenants are not going to be as desirable. And you might find yourself in a place where you own a building but you produce $20,000 or $30,000 less per month because it's a worse location, worse property, and you're going to have a harder time getting the referrals you're looking for. Other times, you can find a purchase scenario where it's a better building, better location, and it might even cost less than leasing. And so there's all sorts of scenarios you're looking at. The game plan should be go to the market, hire a qualified agent that understands healthcare, understands tenant and buyer rep that's going to work exclusively for you with no conflicts of interest. They're not working for landlords and sellers in the neighboring properties where you're negotiating against your own broker on properties. You got to avoid those conflicts. But hire someone, go to the market, let them show you the top options, and then look at options to lease, look at options to purchase, look at retail, look at office, look at medical office, look at everything, and then narrow down to the top 4 or 5 properties, and then start negotiating simultaneously with 4 or 5 landlords, 4 or 5 sellers. And that's also, that's a difference between commercial and residential. Residential, you negotiate on the property you want to purchase. You find a house you want to buy, you submit an offer, the seller signs the contract, you're locked and loaded, you're under contract. Yeah. In commercial, you negotiate on what's called a non-binding basis. And it's very common to negotiate with 3 or 4 owners simultaneously because there's so many other things you're trying to figure out. You're trying to figure out lease rates and annual increases and the length of the lease, and a tenant improvement allowance and exclusivity for your specialty. And what if you want to sell your practice? What kind of assignability or buyout clauses do you get? And there's so many other things that are there. You can't just pick one property in commercial and lock in and think that you're going to get the best deal or that you're going to know the market. So I'm mixing 2 topics here. First original question, purchase versus lease. Both of them have really great attributes and reasons of why you want to do them. Bottom line, if there's a chance to purchase where it's where you want to be long-term, it's the right size, and you have the chance to increase your net worth every month, you cut a check, your net worth increases because you're paying down principal and you're picking up huge tax deductions of ownership all day long. If the location to lease is better, if you don't want to borrow as much, if you want more flexibility, leasing has some really compelling reasons to lease as well.
Yeah. Well, let me ask a few questions, Colin, because there's so much that you just shared right there. I want to unpack some of it. So you mentioned the biggest thing really though is to come in the whole situation with an open mind. So really to divorce yourself from this idea that, hey, it's the traditional idea of negotiating a sale of a home, for example, was what you used as an example. So you go in with one home that you really like it and you put in an offer, it's binding, and that's it. But instead you're saying come into the market and consider all options. Now I'm kind of mixing two things too, but you're considering all options, both leasing and purchasing. And if you're going purchasing, then look at multiple properties simultaneously and enter into, what did you call it? A non-binding basis.
Non-binding. Yeah. It's a non-binding letter of intent or request for proposal. And you're exactly right. If you're looking at doing a new location or a new office, or even if you're looking at a lease renewal, you don't just go and start negotiating with your landlord. You go to the market first and you see what the market bears and you submit offers on 3 or 4 properties. Now, again, if you're a dentist or a doctor trying to do this yourself, you don't have the 30, 40 hours of time it takes to do this effectively. You need to hire someone professionally. Don't try the do-it-yourself mentality. You're going to do it inferior. You're going to get worse results. You're going to spend a lot of time, and you're going to lose a ton of money that you could have put into your practice or just had with your family or personally, not trying to do something that you're not qualified to do. Yeah. And then that broker or agent, they do it for you. And then they go 3, 4 rounds of negotiations. Each time they get a response back, they compile it into a comparison spreadsheet. They put it together and show you, here's the results of round 1 of us negotiating with 3 landlords. This is what it looks like. You talk about how do we go back? How do we counter? You counter them, you go back, and then you come back with the results. Here's round 2 of us negotiating with 3 different landlords or 4 different landlords. And the doctor starts to see, hey, this is market, that's not market. You're getting educated in the process. Right. And then the doctor's going to be able to tell you, hey, this is a good deal or a bad deal. They're going to know if it's a good deal because if 3 or 4 landlords are willing to do it or not willing to do it, that's going to tell you the market's not where you want it to be or that's too aggressive or you've got the best deal you could ever hope of. Let's take this deal. And the doctor gets educated in that process. And that's what you're hoping for. You're hoping to get educated. You're hoping then to be able to make a decision with the peace of mind and assurance saying, I got the best terms possible at the best property available, and I didn't leave anything on the table, and I didn't miss seeing some option that would have been a better fit. That peace of mind is invaluable. Yeah, absolutely. And as you're describing this too, Colin, I'm thinking how interesting it is to have someone else be doing this work. And as a result, you're not as emotionally involved or emotionally attached to a specific property. Because I see this happen all the time, even in marketing, but going back to the residential example, people get so connected to a specific property that it blindsides them a little bit. It makes them blind to certain things that might not be really in line with what they're hoping for. So to have someone else who knows the market, like you were saying, who knows the industry really well, knows what to look for, also has the experience of negotiation in their pocket as well. That's who you want doing all this work for you, right? Absolutely. It's the same reason that the patient comes to the doctor. They could try to figure it out. Right. They could, when it comes to dentists, Tom Hanks put an ice skate to his tooth. There's more than one way to get the job done. Right. Tie a string around and shut the door. There's all sorts of the adages of, sure, you can probably do it yourself, but it's probably going to leave you with the result that's less than desirable. But yeah, if you want to save money, sure. If you don't want to pay the oral surgeon to remove that tooth, you can find a way to get it out. Yeah. It's probably not the best game plan though. Right. No, exactly right. So what are you've probably seen a ton of these too, Colin. What are the mistakes that dentists are typically making as they're looking at office space, as they're purchasing or leasing office space? What do you see most commonly? Yeah, I'll give you a few of them, and we've touched on them, but I'll be brief in the ones we've already covered. The first one is it's the do-it-yourself mentality. It's the idea of, hey, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to figure it out. And there's a lot of doctors that think they're going to save money by not using a broker. Right. But the problem with that mentality is the doctor's not paying the commissions. Commissions in commercial real estate are paid by the landlord or seller, just like they are in residential. The seller pays the fees. If you're a buyer buying a house in residential, you don't pay your broker. They get half of the listing broker's commission. You show up to a property as a buyer without an agent, the listing broker gets a double commission. You didn't save a dime. Yeah. Now, in commercial real estate, landlords and listing brokers would love to tell you, if you don't have a broker, we'll give you a better deal. And they are flat out lying to you. They're just banking on you believing that. They're going to give you, not only are they not going to give you a better deal, they're going to give you worse terms. You're going to get a worse deal. And then the listing broker gets a double commission, or the landlord just pockets the money. Yeah. So the do-it-yourself mentality, because I'm going to save money, that's foolish. The idea that you're going to save time doing it yourself, that's foolish. You're going to waste a lot of time. So that's probably the top mistake doctors make. Next mistake doctors make is they go after one property. They find a property and then they only start negotiating with that property. The problem is you don't have any benchmark to measure that deal, right? So when you negotiate with multiple landlords or sellers simultaneously, you can measure the deal. You can weigh out the deals. When you only have one property, you don't know if the tenant improvement allowance they're offering is as good as you could have gotten somewhere else. You don't know that. And so it's kind of like saying, well, hey, how tall is that building over there from a half mile away? Can I go measure it? No, you just have to guess. I think it's so-and-so tall. I think it's this tall. When you have 3 or 4 properties that you're negotiating on simultaneously, you can measure or weigh those deals, and that's what you're going for. So second mistake is only negotiating on one property. And you see this the most commonly during a lease renewal. Doctor's been in their building for a long time and they want to stay and they start negotiating with their landlord. You lose all credibility. You have no posture. And if you're doing it yourself, same thing. Landlord knows that if you're negotiating by yourself, you're not serious about moving, especially on a lease renewal. And so that's a terrible game plan if you're doing a lease renewal, is to start negotiating with your landlord before you go to the market. And then I could keep going. I'll give you one more. The third one, we see a lot of doctors making this mistake, is they ask their colleagues or peers what terms they achieved. So you'll have a doctor ask their friend, hey, did you lease the space here, you renewed your lease, what did you get? And then they ask the doctor shares what he or she received. And here's the reality. There's a chance that was a really good deal, but the chances are higher it probably was average or pretty poor.
Yeah.
And so in this scenario, they're asking a colleague or peer what they achieved or what their results were when that doctor did not capitalize, didn't have a game plan, didn't have a strategy, didn't create any posture, and they probably left $100,000, $200,000 on the table. And now this doctor is going to measure their upcoming deal against a really poorly negotiated transaction. Yeah. And that happens all the time too. And then I'm going to throw a fourth one in just for extra credit, which is doctors mistaking the fact that they're incredibly intelligent and highly trained in their area of focus or specialty for the idea that they're going to be the jack of all trades. Just because you're extremely intelligent, one of the most qualified people in your city or state for what you do, doesn't mean that you're a marketing expert. Exactly. Doesn't mean that you should be reviewing your own lease contract. Doesn't mean that you should be trying to cut corners and try to sub out different portions of the build out and bring in your own people. That's a really bad game plan. Hire experts, trust them to do their job, and you're going to save a lot more money and you're going to get a much better product without wasting your time.
Yeah, and it's going to save you hours and hours of stress. It's going to free up so many hours to do other things that you're better qualified for, or just free time, just leisure time. Heaven forbid you had more leisure time in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about lease renewal. Let's dive into that a little bit further. How do you successfully renegotiate a lease? Because you just mentioned you do not want to look at just the one property. You want to be outsourcing and looking at multiple different options at the same time. But what else factors into a successful lease renewal?
It starts by knowing the market. A lot of people will come into a lease renewal and they'll say, well, it's easier not to move, which is true. Yeah. Or they'll say, well, I don't know if I want to borrow money, or I don't know if I want to move. And so they'll go to their landlord and they'll ask the landlord the question, what will you do for me if I stay, or send me a proposal? Or the landlord will come to them and just give them a proposal because the doctor waited too long and the lease is going to get renewed in a month or two and the doctor needs to deal with it. Yeah. Any of those scenarios is going to result in a significant amount of money that the doctor is going to lose. If you tell a landlord on a lease renewal, send me a proposal, you might as well just tell the landlord that you have no clue what you're doing and ask them to please charge you several dollars a foot more than you should pay, and just to pound you into the ground in the negotiation. If you tell a landlord, send me a proposal, or what would you do for me? What the landlord hears is this: this guy has no idea what he's doing. He's not willing to move. He doesn't have an agent. They've not been to the market. if he or she knew what they were doing, they would have submitted a proposal to me. So
Right.
if you tell a landlord, send me a proposal, it's like, I mean, again, I'm going to give a bad example, but it's like going to a used car lot and saying, I have $40,000. That's the most I can spend. How much does that car cost right there?
Right.
This car is $40,000 today. I mean, that's the game plan. If you knew what you're doing, your broker would be calling, not you. You'd have already gone to the market and seen what other options were available to purchase if you wanted to buy. If you wanted to relocate, you know what other landlords were willing to offer you. And you'd be submitting an offer to the landlord saying, here's the terms I would consider, or my client would consider renewing at, but we're going to call the shots. We're in control. We're the one that has the options. Your options either to do a market deal and renew us or go find a new person and lose a ton of money until the space gets released. Our option is you give us a market deal, or we go somewhere else and get a market deal, or we go buy a building. And we know what a market deal is. We've measured and weighed other options, and we have a gauge for what's a good, average, or bad deal, and we're not going to be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Very different game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're seeing, so some of the dentists are just saying, well, God, I just don't want to move. That's too much hassle. But you also got to look at it from, the perspective of the landlord, that they don't necessarily want to go out and find someone else either. So if you're the one that comes and, like you said, dictate the terms and say, here's our proposal, you're the first one to bring that up and establish those terms, then the tables are flipped, and they're the ones saying, well, I don't really want to go find another person to lease this space. And so you really have the upper hand, especially if you know what you're talking about when it comes to the market.
Yeah. The reality is people want to assume they can just tell a landlord what they want to do. That's foolishness. Like you tell a landlord you don't want to move, the landlord's going to charge you the most they can get away with before they force you to move out of their property. And you say, well, why would a landlord do that? The answer is because they're in the landlord business to make money. And I can make it really personal for a doctor. Do you think the insurance company that you submit paperwork to that reimburses you, do you think they want to reimburse you the highest amount of money or the lowest amount of money? They want to reimburse you the lowest. I mean, this is super simple. The landlord's no different. If a market lease rate's $25 a square foot, and that's what it would lease at if the space is vacant, but if you're paying $27 a foot because your lease increased every year and now you're looking at a renewal, they're not going to take you back to 25, which is what they would charge a brand new tenant, unless they have the fear they're going to lose you.
Right.
And if you tell them you're not willing to move, or if you have 2 months left on your lease before it expires and they know that you don't have enough time to relocate, they're not going to charge you 25. They're not going to charge you 27. They're going to charge you 28 or 29. Right. And also you find yourself in a place where you don't have time to move. You don't have any options and you're at their mercy. And then you're going to overpay by $3-4 a square foot. That's going to cost you $100,000, $200,000. Yeah. And so it's again, going back to it, there's a lot on the line. And the idea of just telling the person what you want to do and hoping they're going to give you the best terms possible, that's crazy. I mean, that's nobody's selling anything is going to sell it for way less than they think they could sell it to somebody else for, or less than you're willing to pay. If they think you're willing to pay 28 because you don't want to move, then the new market lease rate's 28. The new water line's 28. It's not 25. It's 28.
Oh. That's crazy. Yeah, there's so much more to it than I initially thought, and how, we keep coming back to it, but really how much is at stake here just for your property? I mean, whether it's a lease, whether it's a purchase, there's so many other things that contribute to, have long-term ramifications that you just don't really think about all that often. Yeah. Well, again, I'll give you one more example. Just try to drive this one home. If you're going to sell your house and you hired a broker to list your property and they said, like, your house is probably worth $450, but there's no other houses for sale in the neighborhood. There was 2 other ones, but they just went under contract. So you have the only house for sale that's on the market that's available in the neighborhood. And I already know there's a couple buyers circling because we talked to them. So your house is worth $450, but I bet because there's no inventory, we could probably get $525 or $550. What do you want to sell it for? Your responsibility will sell it for as much as you can sell it for. If you can sell it for $550, sell it for $550. And so, but what if it's only worth $450 though, but someone will pay $550? Yeah. Sell it for $550. And so it's the same thing. Landlords, it doesn't matter if they're a good landlord, a bad landlord, if they're polite, if they're rude, if they're your friend, if they're a stranger, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is they're in it to make money. The insurance companies that reimburse you after you provide a service or a procedure, they're in it to make money. They want to give you the least amount of money that you possibly get away with. You want the most amount of money.
same thing. Landlord wants to charge you the highest amount. You want to pay the least amount. And so you've got a negotiation, and you've got to make sure that you go in there savvy and make sure that you don't get taken advantage of.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're a type of person that just doesn't thrive in that type of situation where you're comfortable, trying to dictate terms and saying, hey, this is what it's worth, then all the more reason to find someone that's good at it. The same thing, patients look at it the same way. If they go to a dentist that's just not good, not comfortable with doing, a root canal, for example, they're going to go find an endodontist, or, they're going to find someone who's really good at it and very comfortable and very confident in what they're doing. It's the same principle applies to finding a great agent or broker.
You got it. That's exactly right.
Okay. Well, Colin, we could keep going on this, but any last tips that you'd have for dentists out there as they're looking, maybe they're coming up on a renewal, or maybe they're just starting to look for practice, a place for their practice. Any other thoughts or suggestions before we sign off?
Yeah, I can give a couple of things that are just random right now. I would say, number one, if you have a loan and you haven't looked at refinancing it, now's a phenomenal time to do that. Interest rates are at all-time lows. If you've ever thought about purchasing real estate, I highly recommend you look at trying to purchase, whether it's buy a piece of ground and build your own building or buy an existing building or condo. You should absolutely be looking at it. It might not be the best transaction. You might pass on it, but don't make that decision before you've seen the market and you know what the market bears. Always hire an agent. Don't try this do-it-yourself mentality. It's not a good game plan. And then last, approach every transaction with a strategy. How are you going to capitalize and understand people are going to try to take advantage of you. They're going to try to charge you more than you should pay. They're going to try to give you less concessions than you deserve. And you've got to realize that in order to get what you deserve and what you want, you've got to have a strategy. You've got to create posture. You got to have options. And it's going to take some serious effort to get to that position. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's the same strategy that I try to apply with all of our clients is go into each situation with a strategy. You're trying to maximize the value that you're providing for a patient, for example. In this case, you're trying to maximize what you can do with your property, whether it's getting the most out of it or renegotiating an effective lease, anything like that. You've got to come in with some forethought. You got to have a plan. Otherwise, you're just going to succumb to whatever comes to your mind, and that's not a good thing. It's just like you said, it's not a good game plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of doctors find themselves just pushing paper, signing off on a document. It's good enough. I don't have time to deal with it. And then they hear someone like our group speak, and then they ask us, "Hey, would you review my lease? How does my lease or how do my terms compare to the market?" And we give them the results, and their response is, "Shoot, I just lost 100, 200,000. Can you fix it?" The answer is, "I can fix the next deal, but I can't fix this one. Yeah. So I can help improve you in the future, but we got to wait till this lease expires in 7 years, and then we'll get a fresh crack at it." But just you got to know what's on the line, and you got to deal with it with a real strategy.
And how tragic that is, when you're talking to these doctors that just have, and you know how they are, they've invested so much time and money to get to where they're at, and then to forfeit literally $100,000, $200,000. How sad is that? That's just, it drives me nuts. That's so sad. Well, Colin, thanks so much for joining on the show today. Where, if people are interested in learning more about you or about your company, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our website is carr.us, carr.us. That's the best way to reach us. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a couple options. One, you can click to find an agent, and we've got agents across the country. So you can click there, put your state or city in, and then it'll populate the agents that are there that are available to work with you in an upcoming transaction. We also have a free evaluation. If you want to figure out how your current lease compares to the market, if you want to know what it would look like if you were to purchase a property and how those payments or structure would compare to your current lease, we'll run a free purchase versus purchase analysis, lease versus purchase analysis, et cetera. And we can tell you what time to start your next transaction, what's the optimal window. We can give you a ton of tips and strategies to make your next transaction work at the highest level. And then last, we've got a huge resources tab. We've got hundreds of articles, podcasts, case studies, photo albums, all sorts of stuff for people to see, ideas for offices, layouts, do's and don'ts, tips and tricks, all sorts of fun stuff.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I'll make sure to link that up in the show notes. But yeah, definitely, you guys, if you nothing else, take the free evaluation, just see how you compare. The best thing to do is to get educated and start to understand what your options are. So I'll make sure that's linked up in the show notes. But Colin, hey man, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll have to have you back.
That sounds great, man. Great to be here. Thank you.
Did you enjoy this episode of the Dental Marketing Secrets Podcast? Head on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And for more proven marketing strategies to grow your practice, visit practicerocket.net.